start now. Let's be super Swissy and on time. So before giving the floor to Boris and for his presentation, so I'd like to present myself. I'm Yanis. For those who don't know me, I'm one of the organizers of GenevaWeb. And of course, I'd like to thank the sponsors that we have for those meetups. So Angularity.io, an Angular consulting and training company in the US, led by Daniel Vanja. If you need any kind of expertise regarding JavaScript and more precisely the Angular framework, just contact this guy. He knows a lot about it and he will be able to help you for sure. The other big sponsor is, of course, the EPFL Extension School, which I'm part of, and which is supporting us with the pizza and the drinks. So pizza will arrive a bit later on. We'll try to match the arrival of the pizza with the end of the talk to have everything warmed when we finish. Warm when we finish, yes. And of course the Geneva Solution Space, which is hosting us, thanks a lot. Little slide to tell you that in fact GenevaWeb, it's you, okay? GenevaWeb and you, it's a ton of love and perfect world. We're looking for sponsors, so please participate as sponsors. We'd like to do amazing things, like also inviting like big speakers, and of course for that we'd like to pay them. So yeah, if you'd like to sponsor us, it will allow us to do that, and also to continue to pay the meetup fees, the pizza, the drinks, and everything else. GenevaWeb is you because you're invited also to speak at GenevaWeb. If you have anything to tell about what you're doing in the web world, at your work or as a side project, you'll be welcome to do so. Just contact me in both cases if you'd like to sponsor us or talk here at GenevaWeb. There are multiple ways of contacting us. The GenevaWeb meetup page, of course, Twitter, GenevaWeb. Follow us there. Sometimes we post updates about the current and next meetups. And of course, the GenevaWeb meetup Gmail address. The next meetup is already scheduled for the 17th of December. Nate Jenkins will talk about GraphQL. So you wouldn't probably miss that either, to learn about GraphQL and what you can do with that. And that's it. I think, yeah, Boris. Thank you. Not sure.
So, what's going on there? So hello everybody, so I'm Boris. I'll talk back about React Native today. So with a question mark, because I guess many in the audience are wondering whether React Native is a good solution for their future project. So a developer's perspective, because I happen in that project to be a developer. So why would you ever wonder about React Native? You can have an idea, your boss can have an idea. You want maybe to explore and become rich with an idea. Or you're looking for a job and you want to learn new technologies. Or maybe you have a multi-billion user base and you need an app. So that happens to some people, and it happened to Facebook a few years ago. So that's about your motivation, and now who you are. So you can be a developer, you want to maybe become a developer, hire a developer, or you're just curious. Everything here is about mobile technology, of course. Or maybe you're Facebook. Talking about Facebook a lot because actually React Native is a Facebook product. So that's my situation. So I'm part of a group, TPFL. So we're not a tech company, but we're like a very tech-oriented group at TPFL. And my job was to do this. So this is an app in a big thing. So these are other apps, by the way, that we had done by an external which we outsourced. And we weren't very, very happy with their development and the relationship in that company, so we decided to do that ourselves. And then came up the question, what tool should we use? It's a mobile app, yeah. So whenever you ask yourself that question, you turn to the Google jungle, what I call the Google jungle, and you start looking for tools. What tools can I use to develop a mobile app? And the problem there is that you have many, many different opinions. You have, first of all, these opinions were given out at a certain time, so very fast opinions become outdated, stories become outdated, and there is a lot of passion in all that field. So there are people who are fans of technology, other people who hate the technology, and so on. So what should we do? So many opinions, and then you discover that there are many tools and many languages. So actually, crawling the web will hardly give you a real answer to your question whether you should use React Native or something else. But very, very quickly, you understand that you have two paths, actually. One is Go Native, which means that to develop for iOS, you use the Apple environment, which is packaged under the Xcode app. And for the Android world, you will use Android Studio. Xcode uses proprietary Apple languages, either Objective-C or Swift, and Android Studio uses Java. So already you understand that if you go native, you need many different skills to develop for iOS and Android. The other way, which hopefully will allow you to do the whole job yourself, or with a very small team, is to go cross-platform. So historically, going cross-platform means building hybrid apps with HTML. So people came with the idea that instead of having a native app for each platform, you would just use a container for a web display of some sort, where you can put HTML. And HTML works on all platforms on Earth. So that's the thing you very quickly understand. So at some point, Facebook came to that situation where they had to choose. And so in that jungle, he was probably the richest man in that jungle, was Zuckerberg. And their first decision was to go HTML5, so hybrid. But already back in 2012, he made that statement that that was probably their biggest mistake as a company. So probably there is a better choice than going hybrid, the old way. And that's what they discovered and decided to do something better than HTML5 and still stay cross-platform. So that was their way out of the jungle. They are a big company, so they could afford building a new framework, a new SDK, a new environment to do something cross-platform that is better than what's on the market there. One of the things that people complain about the HTML hybrid apps is that they don't look and feel native. So everything is you have a bit of a lag when you move from a screen to another one. Then the design of the buttons and of everything doesn't evolve with the framework and so on. So they very quickly look outdated and don't feel like nice. So they decided we can do maybe something better than that. And that's when they came up with the idea to build React Native. As we'll see later, it's called React Native because it's based on a technology that is called React. And it's native because it's really targeting native experience for users. So it allows you to build apps for iOS and Android. You can build these apps either on Mac, on Windows, or Linux. Just for a comparison, you cannot build easily a native app for iOS on anything other than a Mac. Android is already multi-platform. Yeah. So React Native was born in 2013, and after they played with it and did some documentation and fixed many bugs and stuff, they made it public and open sourced it in 2015. And that was quite a big thing at the time, with people wondering, is it worth going React Native or not? Because it was quite a small, I mean, it had no community and everything, but very quickly it became bigger. And now actually they're porting React Native to Mac, Windows, and Linux, and the web. So the idea being that you can use your skills in React Native to build apps for Mac OS, for Windows, for Linux, and even for the web. So as I said, it's based on React. React is a bit older, but it's quite new too. And the idea here is that at the time they wanted for the web to have a library that allows you to build user interfaces in JavaScript. So until then, what you had to do a web page, you had to write HTML to build the interface, and then JavaScript to handle the events and interaction with the user. They wanted to unify that in one thing. So actually, your whole web page can be written in JavaScript. It's also open source since 2013, and it's very widely used. So if you learn React Native, you'll learn a lot of React, which can be reused in the web. So that's just a summary. So React is for the web, and it's using a JavaScript extension to put DOM, so elements on the web page. And same thing for the native side of things. So you use that JavaScript extension to build up interfaces with native views. So the native thing here is important because that was the original goal. So when you build a React Native app, you build a native app. So everything is evolving around JavaScript. JavaScript is older, but it's not very, very old, but it dates back to 1995. It's a very popular, I mean, I don't think I need to talk a lot about JavaScript history here. Probably most of you know most of it. Originally it targeted browsers only. The thing is that JavaScript is really a success story in that sense that now it's used a lot outside of its original targets. So on servers and mobile apps. So now the question is, what can I do with React Native? So probably you're wondering, if I go React Native, can I do this or that? You can do everything. Everything that an app can do, you can do. So if anybody tells you that, oh, but React Native, you can't do this or that, it's wrong. You can do everything. The thing is how difficult it can be to do this or that. And some things are very easy, So some things are much easier than if you go native. And other things actually require you to write native code. So in React Native, you can write purely native code if you want to. But interaction with the JavaScript thing can be a bit challenging at times. So now, if you decide to give it a try, you'll try the hello world thing that everybody tries at some point. So if you don't have them, you'll need to download and install Xcode and Android Studios and a few tools. So say it takes you 45 minutes. And then you just write a few commands in the terminal. Say it takes you 15 minutes. And then magic happens. Just write one command more and you have an app running on iOS. Then you write another command and you have the same app running on Android. So that's kind of magic. And that's very, very appealing, probably, if you want to do a multi-platform app. So say in 1 hour you have that. And then you can be curious and go to your file explorer and have a look at what's there. And there already you see that actually you have a lot of different things. So you have files that are, actually the app, the JavaScript thing, the React Native thing is there. And then you have the iOS native thing in the background that allows you to run it on iOS, and the Android thing. And then you have the modules. So the whole JavaScript thing is based on packages that you install and they go into that node modules subfolder. And then you have hidden files that hopefully you can access, even if they're hidden. And then you see that you have a few things, and maybe you wonder what these things are, and it gives you already a hint of the whole world that comes with React Native. So you have a few things that are actually tools for JavaScript. So the Babel, RC, the flow, config, and stuff. It's just the tip of the iceberg of the complexity of things that go behind React Native. If you're interested in that hello world thing, I just copied and pasted the commands that are given by Facebook in their Getting Started HTML page. So once you've gone through that hello world, which is very satisfactory actually, you do a few things and you really say hello to the multi-platform world. But then comes the real world. You start reading, you're back to the Google Journal, and you find documentation, tutorials, blog posts, and everything, and you start playing with it, and saying hello to the world, the planet, the universe, and everything, and maybe at some point you'll start saying hello to your app and your own idea. And already, actually, when you go through all this, you see that, the sources you need to document yourself and the tutorials and the blog posts and everything, come from very, very different sources. It's not like if you want to develop a native iOS app, you have, one major source of documentation and information, and this is Apple itself. Same thing for Android. In React Native, there are many, many players around. But let's say you decide to go on and you start to understand how things are working. And very quickly, you'll see that there are many pieces in that puzzle, and we translate in two worlds. So the blue one is the JavaScript world, and the orange one is the native one. And in these pieces, you have your JavaScript and your native code. So for very simple apps, you won't need any native code, I mean, of your own. But probably, if your project is something more than a very simple app displaying schedule for something, I mean, if you need interaction with the hardware, either the camera or the geolocation or the sensors of any sort, you'll need to write or use native code. So this is actually, that would be the ideal thing, that actually you really need to take care of your JavaScript and your native code. Actually, my experience is this. So on the top left is a homunculus. It's a cortical homunculus. It reflects the size of different parts of the body compared to the room they take in our brains. So this is actually the homunculus thing of what you do when you work with React Native. Yes, you take care a lot about your JavaScript, probably more than about your native code. But actually, you have to either read or fix third-party JavaScript quite a lot, and sometimes even third-party native code. I mean, that happened in our project. So already it's already a bit different than what the advertising could tell you about React Native. So now, about JavaScript. That's a quote I found on the web, and it's simple, and it really, I really agree with that quote. So I decided to copy-paste it to that presentation. So JavaScript wasn't meant for massive applications at the beginning. It was just to handle clicks on the web, very simple things, or do simple animations or that stuff. So the goal there was that it should be very accessible. It should be easy to learn, at least the basics. It should be very accessible, and so that people use it, because that was one of the challenges of the people who did that JavaScript at the beginning. They wanted people to script for the web. I mean, at that time, web pages were very static, so they wanted to attract people to adding some functionality through programming. So they made it very, very simple. But simple can be evil for bigger projects. So, okay, so if it lacks things, what can I do? So very, very quickly, you understand that people think that, first of all, JavaScript should use types. So JavaScript is not typed. So something can be a string, a text, can be nothing, all at the same time. I mean, not at the same time, but it can move from one content to another without problem. The thing with that is that if you receive, for instance, something from a server, which is a string, but actually you're waiting for a number. That number comes as a string. JavaScript won't warn you that, okay, there is a problem. I mean, you expect a number, but what you receive is a string. And then you receive two of them, and you decide to add them. And if you add 2 and 3, it's 5. But if you add string 2 and string 3, it's 23. But if it's a string and you do a minus, then you still get -1. So, I mean, these kind of things can be really a pain if you develop bigger projects. So people came with the idea that we can patch JavaScript so that it forces us to some extent to use types. And there are many reasons for that, and people tell you there are many reasons for that. And same thing for code style. So JavaScript is very, leaves you very free to style your code as you wish. It's a bit like a city without lights. I mean, you can put semicolons, you can avoid them, you can, so people decided, okay, let's put some order there, let's put some police. And these are called linters. And I even found a guy, so this is my first thesis, written by an Icelandic guy. Not sure about the adjective in English. So it's more than 100 pages. So that guy digged into that, why and how people use linters. And there are many whys, many hows. But in any case, he doesn't really challenge the fact that it's needed. So that means that once you've understood that, you have to decide, okay, I'll code in JavaScript, but how? So I need an editor. So if you write native iOS or Android stuff, that's a question you don't ask ever. Because if you go iOS, you use Xcode. If you go Android, you go Android Studio. If you go React Native, it's not the same because there are several editors on the market that allow you to do that. And I've listed only maybe the most used ones, and which are free, but there are many other paid solutions. And then, And then you need plugins. Why do you need plugins? Because of these patches you need to apply to JavaScript. So you need your editor to tell you whenever there is a mistake in your code style or in the typing you've done of your JavaScript. So actually, when you start playing with React Native, this is again a homunculus type of thing. So you would have liked to spend, that your app and maybe a React Native, since you're learning it, take a lot in your brains. But actually, you've already spent a lot of time wondering what editor, and not only wondering, but probably trying them. Same for the linters, so for the code style. Same for the typing of your JavaScript. And then all of this comes with a configuration. So again, you find people who advise you to do that configuration. Airbnb came with a pre-done configuration for the style and everything. So again, you read a lot, is this better, worse, and so on, and you start playing with it. And actually, you've spent already a lot of time with that. Then, that's about JavaScript as a language. But now, that's my quote. So, same thing, same thing about React Native. So React Native itself lacks a lot of things to write real applications. So you'll need a lot of external things. When you go native, either iOS or Android, you spend quite a lot of time building your project until you reach a point where you need something else. With React Native, it comes right away. So one of the things that you need, and that you'll need very, very soon in your investigations, is that probably you need Redux. Redux is a thing it's a predictable state container. So it's a thing that allows you to handle a proper way the state of your app. So React Native comes with a way to handle the state of components. So it's already built in. But app-wise, there is nothing. So you need maybe something like Redux, which has become probably a standard. And then you need something else to handle side effects. So actually, for those who are not aware of what that is, it's just to help you build something bigger without making too much spaghetti. So, and Saga here is an alternative side effect model. Alternative why? Because Facebook came with their own solution for that, which picked up at some point, but probably Saga is winning the race now. But anyway, that means that on top of React Native, you need other things to just build an app, a bigger app, let's say, other than a Hello World. But then you need many other things. So you need third-party packages for navigation. That's one of the biggest complaints people have about React Native. So Navigation is about transitioning between screens. So whenever you tap a row and then it brings you another screen, or go back in the screen stack and everything, you need something that takes care of navigation. And I think now Facebook has decided to take over the development of one of the third-party packages that was on the market. But still, I mean, there are a few. You have to choose yours. Maybe one now will become standard. But we spent quite a time on that. And just for the little story, we used one version of it, which now is not compatible with the current version, and just moving from one version to the other one, to the new one, is a really big thing, a few days of work, probably, minimum. Then you need external packages for a simple table view, if you need one, for icons, and even to support an iPhone X or XR, the iPhone 10, sorry, iPhone 10 series. So many packages are needed. Then React Native also lacks things to adequately debug applications. Again, it's something that comes out of the box if you go native. So, if we go back to our hello real world, for debugging you'll need something else. I mean, either you debug in Chrome, and I think that's what Facebook tells you should do when you read their documentation. Chrome is a web browser that has been recycled here for its debugging, JavaScript debugging capabilities to debug React Native. Or you can use your editor, either Atom or Visual Studio Code, for instance, with plugins. My experience was that I could debug with Atom until like 2 months ago, and now I can't. And I spent some time trying to understand why, and then after 2 hours I gave up. And then you have something called Reactotron, which is a really nice tool that helps you see what's going on inside your app. So the Redux and Saga thing that we saw before kind of can be debugged with Reactotron, and it's a nice thing. But bottom line, there are no gold standards. So whenever you have a decision to make, there are no gold standards, and you have to dig into external opinions about everything, which again is not the same if you go native. Then, so there are good things. So JavaScript is easy. I mean, it's accessible. You want, even if you're a beginner. I mean, if you're a beginner, it's probably the easiest language you could pick. Then the first things you do with React Native are very straightforward and satisfactory. It's really nice to have a hello world that starts after 1 hour, and where you can add things, you start modifying the text, and it works. I mean, everything is goes very well at the beginning. One very nice thing also is the hot reloading. So you don't need to reload the whole app to see changes. So that's something you can't achieve with native apps. You can do that with Android, but it's very slow. Whereas there, you just you fix a typo somewhere in a screen, you save, and you see that in a few seconds appear on the screen. Documentation by Facebook is not bad. It's not always up to date, but it's not bad. And then you have quite a large community, since it's been around for a few years. So you have quite a large community. But one thing that struck me is that when I think about that, with my previous projects and thing, whenever I thought about community, I thought about Stack Overflow, which is a place where people just say, I have a problem, what's the solution? And then you have a community giving answers. With React Native, actually, Community for me is in the issues pages of GitHub repos. So most of the time when I had a problem, I found the solution actually in issues on GitHub, which I think tells something about the whole thing. So if we think about our experience until now, so that's the beginning. Difficulty, very low. We did our hello world in quite a few steps. We installed everything without major issues. Everything was fine. And then we started digging into the whole thing. Then went a bit up, quite a lot up. So all the choices we have to make, and it's already a big part of that jump in difficulty. It's not only difficulty about doing things ourselves. It's just understanding, finding, making choices, and so on. And then the real project has been developed, our project, for a year or a bit more. And that's my feeling about the difficulty of the whole thing. So the more it goes, the more it gets difficult. And I would expect it to go the other way. I mean, to go down. Because the more it goes, the more I know about the technology, about this and that. But here, because of updates, breaking changes, because of the time it takes to build the app, etc., my overall purely subjective feeling about the difficulty here is that it's gone up. Now, about the future, I'm not sure. I mean, I hope it will go down, but we'll see. We'll see. Now, again, that's a summary of the whole thing, again, that homunculus. So after a year, I'm a bit frustrated about the time I've spent writing my code or just knowing about React Native components and tools or the whole framework. I've spent a lot of times searching, updating, debugging, fixing stuff. Be it third-party libraries or tools, or React Native with, updates and stuff, and JavaScript things. And actually, it's interesting because in the last months there has been a few stories about big companies giving up React Native, and I think that sums up a lot of what they say about the reasons why they gave up React Native, while still saying that it might be a very good thing for you, but we stopped because of all this. Now I'll talk a bit about debugging. Because that's debugging is, I think, is an important thing to. It's very closely related to your frustration. If you have any frustration in an environment, and here the thing is that you have to debug JavaScript. It's easy. It's not too difficult, and you have several options as we saw. Here are the choices I made, but it's kind of okay. The thing is that you shouldn't forget, if you go React Native, that you might have to debug native code. And so if you're here with a knowledge of JavaScript and no knowledge of native development, you'll have a hard time debugging native code, because you don't know the tools. Xcode doesn't really have a lot of common things with Android Studio. You'll have a hard time. So it's relatively easy if you're a native developer or have some experience with that. And there you don't have really a choice. You go, it's Xcode for iOS and Android Studio for Android. And then you have the bridge between the JavaScript and the native code. And that can be a bit challenging, because the way data is transferred is not really, it's neither really the JavaScript way nor the native way. It's kind of something that makes information transferable from one world to the other, and it can be difficult. I mean, whenever you press a button on the interface and it goes first through JavaScript code and then calls a native thing, you don't have a way to go step by step. So it goes through that JavaScript, then it goes to the native, and then once the native has finished, it goes back to the JavaScript, and you have no way to follow that. So that can be a bit challenging. Then once you've debugged, you think about deployment. And deployment is about deploying to testers and to the public. To the public means you don't have really a choice. I mean, it's you have to deploy through the App Store and the Play Store. But the interesting thing here, actually, that comes with React Native is that you can deploy also the JavaScript code only. So once your app has been deployed to the public or to testers, whenever you make a modification to your JavaScript, you can have people update the app, I mean, without even knowing that the app updates. So you can have the app update, actually, only the JavaScript code. That's actually a big plus. It avoids going through the submission processes of the App Store or the Play Store. Especially the App Store is a bit tedious sometimes. So you can really deploy your changes very fast. So that's really a big plus compared to purely native. What we chose is Microsoft App Center. So it's a place where you can, the App Center can build your app from A to Z, deploy it to testers, deploy it to the public, and can help you deploy your JavaScript only. So that's a little summary of the tools that you need. If you take the first two columns, it's something that you need, whether you go native or React Native. So these are in green, the Android Studio and Android emulator, and in blue at the bottom, Xcode and the iPhone simulator or iPad. And then you need also terminal, the terminal. When you go React Native, you need to do quite a lot of things through the terminal, or write shell scripts at some point. Then you have your editor. So this is the one I use, which is Visual Studio Code. It's a Microsoft product. Then you have the debugging tools. So with the React Native comes a React debugger tool, I think. That's Reactotron that I really like. I mean, it's one of the best tools that I think I've used for debugging. Then you have the deployment App Center, and then you go to the stores themselves. So that's the Play Store and the Apple Store, the App Store. Sorry. So what? Actually, what's the conclusion of all this? One of the questions that people ask most often, I guess, when wondering about React Native is how much of the code can you share? And that's something that nearly all reviews of React Native tell you about. So they tell you 70, 80, 90%. But probably you can share a lot of the code between the two platforms. And if you need somebody to write that code, it's quite easy to find someone who is proficient in JavaScript. If you want yourself, if you want to learn JavaScript, if ever React Native dies or you're fired or anything, the skills you'll have learned in JavaScript will probably be easy to recycle in another project. If you go to React Native, don't forget that probably you'll need at some point some native skills, or even shell skills and so on. If you believe that you can just do stuff, all the stuff with JavaScript, and you'll be fine, I think you won't be very happy about your experience. And so now, if we have a look from a bit farther about the whole thing, in the history of mobile development, at the beginning, there were companies that that had phones and then tablets and needed SDKs and tools to develop for that. That's when Apple came with their own development tool and Google too. So, and then obviously people got bored of writing two apps. I mean, for one app for each platform. So the need for cross-platform arrived, and then came the hybrid apps. Then React Native arrived to, as I said, to fill that need for a closer to native experience. And now, what about the future? If you look at what solutions you have on the market, you'll also see another product, which is by Google actually. It's Flutter, and probably it's a new product, so it was out. It's on the market, I think, since the beginning of the year, or I mean more or less a year, and it's probably providing answers to the problems that I showed in that presentation about the third parties and all the world of different things that you need to develop with React Native. And if we look at Google Trends for a few frameworks, we'll see that, I mean, probably because it's still very immature. It's like at the time with the browsers war. I mean, some browser was nearly, a clear winner on the market, and then now has completely disappeared. And it's probably the same thing that will happen with all these cross-platform frameworks. I think so. That's the old school hybrid apps, and so we see that probably they're out. I mean, little by little, not fully out. I mean, it's still a big community and so on. But React Native, who knows? I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if it reached its maximum. And that's actually we made that decision here to go React Native, but probably Flutter or alternatives to Flutter, but providing you with an integrated environment with all the tools and all the libraries probably will pick up. And if React Native doesn't go that way, I think they will die. So that was it. So either the end or the beginning, depending on how much I convinced you that you should go React Native or these guys to do it. So that was it. Yeah.
So I'm not exactly sure. Is the entire code converted to native when you ship it?
No.
Or does it like have a runtime for JavaScript?
Yeah, that's how it goes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And although it sounded great when you were saying about skipping the review process, I don't know, how is that possible?
It's just that, I mean, as a browser can download JavaScript, I mean, when you do a website, I mean, your site downloads JavaScript and executes it. I mean, it's the same. So the app can download the JavaScript package, the whole thing bundled, the bundle actually, and update the bundle it has when you deployed the app to the user.
Apple is happy with that because it's sandboxed.
I don't know if they're happy, but I think they find minuses, but the pluses are bigger. At the beginning, I'm not sure now, but you weren't allowed to download executable code to an app. So probably either they just close their eyes on that and don't react, or they remove that from the. But it's done by multiple apps, and they don't do anything about that.
Just a follow-up question: where is the JavaScript file? Like, where are the JavaScript files posted? Like
in the app or when you develop?
When you do the over-the-air update.
Yeah.
And you do it through the VS Code. right?
Yeah.
We have the binary in the phone, right? That's running it. It's just
Yeah, it's not a binary. Actually, it's a JavaScript bundle, so it's not compiled.
Yeah,
It's
but
not a
it's
binary.
still an IPA file or an APK file that's distributed.
Ah, you
through
mean the whole
ISO.
thing? Yeah.
The whole thing.
Yeah.
It's already in the phone. Now you say you can do an over-the-air update without going through the process. Where are physically the JavaScript files hosted that are downloaded into the bundle? Is it, if you do it via the App Center, is it through?
I mean, you can do it yourself and implement the whole thing about the download, the update, which comes also with big problems about versioning and stuff. So because you don't want to download a breaking change in the bundle that doesn't work with your binary, with your So the thing we are going to use the Microsoft's App Center. So they allow you to upload to their servers your bundle, and then they have a framework that lets you in the app download that bundle, and they handle the old versioning problem and things. But so I've just investigated it. I don't have I haven't implemented it, so I don't know the whole story, but that's how it works. Yeah.
Obviously it's specific to your app, but if you were able to go back in time and talk to yourself 2 years ago, would you give yourself any advice as to just, pay somebody, go native and avoid React, or would you just stick it out, it's worth it?
No, because I'm sure that if 2 years ago we had chosen to go native, we would regret it now. We would be sure that going multi-platform would have been the way. So, because, I mean, going native is like, no surprise, you know where you go. Whereas this, actually, I think it's the right way to go. Because even if it's a bit too early, if it's a bit too immature, I mean, as all these things, I think anyway it's the way to go.
But even because you have to schedule for two completely different sets of updates and worry, it's a lot more headaches, I would think. But
to go native on both platforms?
Well, because at least that way you only have to change one set of code for an update that you know is coming. You don't have to worry about.
That's what they advertise. But I hope I showed in the presentation that there are many things around it that are far from that ideal world where you have one cross-platform code and that's it, and you're very happy with that. The thing is that you spend a lot of work with third parties, libraries and so on. But if you go native, either you have two guys, or you have one that half of the time spends doing the boring thing of just translating the thing that he wrote for the other platform. So anyway, frustration there, there would be frustration.
But you kind of already have to do that. You were saying that there are lots of parts that integrate with the hardware where you have to go native, so you're already doing this translation job.
But I mean, it's not like your whole project. And it's kind of, for a programmer that likes challenges, it's kind of interesting. How can I take a fast, how can I take a picture fast on Android? It's not like I need a button there and I did that on iOS, and then I'll do the boring work of putting a button on Android. And plus then you have discrepancies between the, you have to catch up with one version. You're always like this when you do the thing on native for the two platforms. There is always one which is late, the other one,
What are some typical examples where you had to go native during development?
Oh, many things. First of all, in our app, we scan barcodes. So for that, we use a third-party native library.
To scan barcode or to access the camera?
No, to scan barcodes. And then
process the image of the barcode? Or?
No, it's just it's something that it's a third-party library which is native and which just opens a screen where that scans what's there. So it's using the camera, and whenever it sees a barcode, it gives you the barcode. So that's just about installing a native third-party library. But apart from that, we needed to take pictures and crop, resize, and so on. And it's not something you would do in JavaScript, because you need it to be fast. and so you do that native. I mean, I don't know of an easy way to crop a picture and then compress it in JPEG and so on in JavaScript.
So is that correct to say that all the cases where you had to go fully native on certain features are due to the link to the hardware of the device?
In our case, yes, but I can imagine another case is when you need for instance, a view that exists on iOS, doesn't exist on Android, for instance, and you want to use it. And nobody on React Native, at React Native, or in the community has made it usable in React Native. So then you need to go in the native code and do all that bridge yourself. That's, I think, another situation where you would absolutely need native. We didn't need that. We used standard buttons, labels, and yeah, or external libraries that have done the job already for us.
You talked about the bridge. Is there any performance trade-off?
No, I mean there is, but it's not noticeable. I mean, people who will tell you click will take more time because it needs to go through the bridge. I mean, if you lose half a millisecond there, I think.
You're not doing a game.
I mean,
so it's not a video game or.
No, but I think even for a game, I mean, user interaction. If you lose half a millisecond, even for the most demanding games, you don't care. Yeah.
So during the last 2 years, I guess, of development, were there many major releases on React Native itself, and did you try to keep up with those? Or?
Yeah. Are you asking if there were months without a major release?
Oh, right. Really?
Yeah, I mean, there were constant
And
releases. Yeah, actually, React Native is still considered a beta. So it's still
Really?
0. Blah, blah, blah. So I think they've diminished a bit the rate of releases, but I think at the beginning when I started looking into that, it was like every 2 weeks there was a release. I mean, not always with breaking changes, but sometimes. Anyway, you have to keep an eye there. It's again that homunculus. You always have a part of your brain of wondering if there is a new version, and then does it fix the problems I had with the other ones? Will it bring new problems and so on? So this is a major issue compared to iOS, for instance, where you have iOS 10, and then for a year you're fine, more or less. Yeah.
Well, you're supported by a single vendor, right, by Apple? You're supported by a single vendor.
Yeah. And it's much more mature. The whole thing is older.
Yeah. So dare I ask about testing strategies? No. Next question. But you could use, JavaScript libraries.
Yeah, I mean, it comes pre-bundled with Jest and stuff, so I mean, there are things, yeah.
I was just wondering, you mentioned a library called Saga, which I think does component lifecycle management or something. Does the component lifecycle differ a lot between React and React Native?
I think there is zero difference.
Okay.
I mean, Saga is totally, I think, agnostic to whether you're in React or React Native. Actually, the package is called React Saga. No, Redux. Sorry, Redux Saga. So,
okay.
Touch a little bit more on React Native for web. You mentioned briefly.
Yeah. So the idea is that in React, whenever you do an interface, you say, I want a div there, I want a this there. In React Native, you say, I want a view, I want a button, and they want you to be able to say, I want a view even in the web. So the thing is that if you build an interface for a mobile app, you can actually reuse it on the web. Behind the hood, it will transform that view to a div or something that is HTML. But that's the idea, yeah.
And that's coming, or it's here now?
I think it's already there. I'm not sure how stable, how blah blah, but it's there. Yeah. I think it's called it's called the React Native Web. Yeah.
It's a full circle.
Yeah.
Interesting approach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it.
Any other questions? Well, thanks again, Boris. Speaking here. You can get 1, 2 if you speak here. So, yeah, contact me. Come to me if you'd like to speak at GenevaWeb or sponsor us. You'll be welcome. The pizza has arrived. You've seen, maybe. So please enjoy.